The first time Ethan confessed to Claire, she didn't simply reject him. She laughed. Not because his confession was ridiculous, because in her eyes, Ethan himself was. Standing behind the school gym with a cheap bouquet trembling in his hands, Ethan looked like the last person anyone expected to confess to the most popular girl in school. His uniform was too big. His glasses were thick. His hair looked like it had personally declared war on every comb in existence, and the acne on his face wasn't exactly helping. Claire stared at the flowers, then at him. "You're serious?" Ethan swallowed. "Yeah." That was when two of Claire's friends appeared around the corner. And instead of ending the conversation quietly, Claire smiled nervously and said the sentence Ethan would remember for years. "Ethan, look at you. Why would you think I'd date you?" Her friends laughed. Claire walked away. And Ethan remained there holding flowers that suddenly felt heavier than bricks. By the next morning, half the class knew. Someone had even drawn a heart around Ethan and Claire's names on the board before crossing Ethan's name out. Teenagers. Nature's most efficient emotional damage delivery system. Ethan didn't fight back. He erased the board, sat down, and acted like nothing had happened. But something had. Until that day, he had always accepted being invisible. He was the weird kid who sat near the window. The guy classmates contacted only when they needed homework answers. The boy teachers described as very intelligent, but too quiet. And strangely enough, Claire had been one of the few people who occasionally treated him kindly. That was why he fell for her. Unfortunately, Ethan had mistaken basic human decency for romantic possibility. A classic beginner mistake. After the rejection, Claire stopped speaking to him almost completely. Maybe she felt guilty. Maybe she was embarrassed. Either way, Ethan got the message. So he did something Claire never expected. He disappeared from her life. Not dramatically. He didn't post mysterious quotes online. He didn't promise revenge. He simply stopped chasing her. And then, a few weeks later, another problem appeared. Ethan's father announced that the family was moving. His company was transferring him to another city, which meant Ethan would leave the school at the end of the semester. When the news spread, hardly anyone reacted. Claire did. For a moment, she found Ethan packing books into his bag after class. "So you're really leaving?" "Yeah." "When?" "Friday." Claire hesitated. Perhaps she expected him to say something else. Perhaps another confession. Perhaps a sad goodbye. But Ethan only zipped his backpack. "Well, good luck." He gave her a small smile. "You too." And that was it. Claire watched him walk out of the classroom without looking back. What she didn't know was that the boy leaving that school had made himself one promise. He wasn't going to spend the rest of his life asking people to see value in him. If there was something about himself he hated, he would change it. If there was something he couldn't change, he would stop apologizing for it. And if someone didn't want him, he would learn how to walk away. At first, the transformation was painfully unimpressive. Ethan didn't wake up 6 feet tall with perfect skin and a jawline sharp enough to cut vegetables. He started by running. Badly. His first attempt lasted 8 minutes. 5 of those minutes involved questioning every decision that had brought him to that sidewalk. But the next day he went again. Then again. He began training at a small gym near his new apartment. He learned how to eat properly. He got his skin treated. He replaced his glasses with contact lenses when he felt comfortable doing so. But the biggest change had nothing to do with his face. At his new school, nobody knew who Ethan used to be. There was no humiliating confession, no nickname, no reputation waiting for him. And for the first time, Ethan realized something uncomfortable. A lot of the cage he had lived inside was built from other people's expectations. Here, he could start again. So when a classmate named Daniel invited him to eat lunch with a group of students, Ethan almost refused out of habit. Almost. Then he remembered his promise. He sat down. The conversation was awkward. Ethan spoke too quietly. He overthought every joke. And when a girl asked what kind of music he liked, his brain temporarily behaved as though he had been asked to negotiate international peace. But nobody laughed at him. The next day they invited him again. Little by little, Ethan changed, not into the loudest person in the room. He never became that. Instead, he became comfortable with silence. He learned that confidence wasn't constantly proving you deserved to be somewhere. Sometimes it was simply sitting there like you already knew. By his final year, Ethan barely resembled the boy who had left his old school. He had grown taller. Training had filled out his frame. His skin had cleared. His hair, once an uncontrolled disaster, now actually looked intentional. But more importantly, people listened when he spoke. He joined the school photography club and discovered he had an eye for composition. That turned into freelance work. Freelance work became paid projects. By college, Ethan was studying visual design while earning enough from photography and editing to pay many of his own expenses. It wasn't some overnight billionaire fantasy. It was better. It was real progress. Meanwhile, Claire's life continued on a completely different track. She graduated from their old school, entered university, dated twice, and occasionally heard Ethan's name through old classmates. The strange part was that every update sounded less like the Ethan she remembered. Apparently, he had become social. Apparently, he worked professionally as a photographer. Apparently, some people from his university followed his work online. Claire searched for him once. She found an account with landscapes, portraits, campaigns, and event photography. But the profile photo was taken from the side, half hidden by a camera. She stared at it for a while. Could that really be him? Then she closed the page. Years passed. And eventually, Claire stopped thinking about the awkward boy behind the gym. Until one Friday evening, her university friend Maya dragged her to an alumni charity event being hosted jointly by several schools. Claire almost didn't go, but Maya had promised free food. And history has proven that many major life events begin with questionable decisions involving free food. The venue was a renovated hotel hall packed with former students, local business owners, photographers, and event staff. Claire was standing near the entrance when Maya suddenly grabbed her arm. "Okay, who is that?" Claire followed her gaze. A young man stood across the room speaking with one of the organizers. Tall, dark hair, black suit jacket over a plain shirt. Relaxed posture. Nothing flashy, but people kept approaching him. A woman thanked him for helping with the campaign photos. Another organizer shook his hand. Two girls nearby clearly noticed him too. Maya smiled. "I'm going to find out." Claire rolled her eyes. "You're impossible." "No, I'm proactive." Before Claire could stop her, Maya crossed the room. Claire watched from a distance as Maya introduced herself. The young man smiled politely. They exchanged a few words. Then Maya pointed toward Claire. The man looked over and froze. Only for a second. Claire noticed it. Then he smiled. Not flirtatiously, not nervously, almost knowingly. Maya returned looking pleased with herself. "His name is Ethan." Claire's expression changed. "What?" "Ethan. He's one of the photographers working with the event. Do you know him?" Claire looked back across the room. The young man had already returned to his conversation. "No." But even as she said it, something felt wrong. Ethan, dark hair, that smile. She searched through old memories, trying to force the pieces together. No. Impossible. The Ethan she remembered had thick glasses and rounded shoulders. This man looked like someone who belonged in a fashion campaign. Maya noticed Claire staring. "You definitely know him." "I knew someone with that name." A few minutes later, the organizer called Ethan toward the stage area to check lighting. As he passed near them, Maya waved. "Ethan!" He stopped. And this time Claire saw his face clearly. His eyes. That was it. Those hadn't changed. Claire's mouth opened slightly. Ethan looked directly at her. "Hi, Claire." She simply stared. He almost laughed. "You look like you've seen a ghost." "You're Ethan?" "Last time I checked." Claire's brain, normally functional, had apparently submitted its resignation. You look different." "That's one way to put it." Ethan smiled. "Been a while." Maya looked between them. "Wait, you two actually know each other?" "We went to school together," Ethan said. Claire was still processing the situation. "How long has it been?" "Almost 6 years." 6 years? Suddenly Claire remembered the flowers, the gym, her friends laughing, and the sentence she had thrown at him because she was embarrassed. "Look at you. Why would you think I'd date you?" Now she wanted the floor to become a portal. Unfortunately, architecture refused to cooperate. Ethan, however, seemed completely relaxed. There was no bitterness in his voice, no revenge speech, nothing. And somehow that made Claire feel worse. An organizer called his name. Ethan glanced back. "I have to work. Good seeing you." Then he left. Maya waited exactly 3 seconds. "You rejected him, didn't you?" Claire looked horrified. "How do you know?" "Because that was the face of a woman remembering a terrible financial decision." "It wasn't like that." Maya raised an eyebrow. Claire sighed. "Fine, he liked me." "And?" "I rejected him." Maya looked across the room at Ethan, then back at Claire. "How badly?" Claire didn't answer. Maya's eyes widened. "Oh no." For the rest of the evening, Claire kept noticing Ethan. Not just because he looked different, because he behaved differently. The old Ethan would have stayed at the edge of the room. This Ethan moved through it comfortably. He joked with clients, directed people during photos, spoke with strangers without looking desperate for approval. And whenever he wasn't working, people came to him. Claire slowly understood that his transformation wasn't something that had happened to him. He had built it. That realization bothered her more than his appearance, because suddenly the boy she had reduced to one embarrassing moment had an entire life she knew nothing about. Near the end of the event, Claire found him alone on a balcony reviewing photos on his camera. She hesitated before approaching. "Busy?" Ethan looked up. "A little. But I can talk." Claire stood beside him. For several seconds, neither said anything. Then she took the least comfortable path available. "I'm sorry." Ethan lowered the camera. "For what?" "You know." He did. Of course he did. Claire continued. "The way I rejected you back then. I could have just said no. I didn't need to embarrass you." Ethan studied her face. Years ago, he had imagined this moment dozens of times. In some versions, Claire apologized. In others, she regretted everything. And teenage Ethan always delivered some devastating speech before walking away dramatically. Adult Ethan found the whole fantasy exhausting. So he simply said, "Yeah, it hurt." Claire looked down. "I know. But we were kids." "That doesn't make it okay." "No, it doesn't." The answer surprised her. Ethan wasn't pretending it never mattered. He just wasn't carrying it anymore. Claire glanced at him. "So you don't hate me?" He smiled. "Claire, I moved cities, finished school, went to college, started a business, nearly destroyed my first camera because I forgot it was sitting on top of my car." She laughed despite herself. "I have had other problems." That was the first time the tension disappeared. They talked for another 20 minutes, then 30. Claire learned that Ethan had started a small creative studio with Daniel, the same classmate who had invited him to lunch years earlier. Ethan learned Claire was studying architecture and working at a design firm. The conversation was strangely easy, which made Claire remember something else. Before everything went wrong, she had actually liked talking to him. She just hadn't liked him enough to risk what her friends might think. Now that detail felt embarrassingly childish. Before leaving, Claire asked, "Are you staying in town?" "For a few days." "Maybe we could get coffee." Ethan looked at her. There it was. The reversal teenage Ethan would have considered the greatest victory imaginable. Claire asking him, Claire looking nervous, Claire waiting for his answer. But he didn't feel triumphant. He felt calm. "Sure," he said. The next afternoon they met at a cafe downtown. Claire arrived 10 minutes early. Ethan arrived exactly on time. And somewhere in the universe, 17-year-old Ethan probably demanded an explanation. They spent 2 hours talking, then met again before Ethan left the city. After that, messages became occasional calls. Occasional calls became regular ones, but Ethan never chased. That difference confused Claire at first. If she disappeared for a day, he didn't send 7 messages asking whether something was wrong. If she was busy, he remained busy too. His life did not stop waiting for her attention, and ironically that made Claire pay more attention to him. Several months later, Ethan returned for another project. Claire saw him outside the train station and smiled before she could stop herself. He noticed. "What?" "Nothing." "That was definitely something." She shook her head. "I just realized you're completely different." Ethan picked up his bag. I'd hope so. 6 years is a long time to accomplish absolutely nothing. I don't mean your appearance. That made him pause. Claire looked directly at him. You used to act like being liked by someone would prove you were worth something. Ethan's smile faded slightly. Because she was right. And now? Now you act like you already know. For a moment, Ethan said nothing. Then he smiled again. Maybe I finally learned. What Claire didn't say was that somewhere along the way, admiration had become attraction. And attraction was becoming something more dangerous. She had once rejected a boy because she couldn't imagine wanting him. Now she caught herself wondering whether he wanted her. The irony was almost rude. But Ethan wasn't interested in making Claire suffer for the past. If anything was going to happen between them, it would happen because of who they were now, not because a rejected 17-year-old finally got his revenge. So when Claire eventually confessed her feelings, Ethan didn't immediately answer. She stared at him. Seriously? He laughed. Sorry, I'm appreciating the symmetry. Claire covered her face. I knew you'd bring that up. I waited 6 years. Give me 5 seconds. She pushed his shoulder. Then Ethan became serious. I like you too. Claire lowered her hands. But? No but. And just like that, the strangest chapter of their story began. Years earlier, Ethan had stood behind a school gym believing Claire's rejection proved something about him. That he wasn't attractive enough, interesting enough, good enough. He had been wrong. The rejection didn't define his value. It exposed how little value he placed on himself. And the real transformation wasn't glasses becoming contacts, awkward clothes becoming tailored ones, or a weak body becoming stronger. It was the moment Ethan stopped building his identity around whether one person wanted him. Ironically, that was exactly when people began seeing him differently, including Claire, especially Claire, because the boy she once rejected had disappeared years ago. And when she finally met him again, she genuinely couldn't recognize the man he had become.